Let's start with this. You guys put out some interesting numbers today. Volume is up about 213%. Your sales are up 186%. You've had legalization in Canada, no more Jeff Sessions, yet the stock's down about 30% in a month. When do these companies start to trade properly?
You know, I think that what you're seeing is it's a very new industry. It's evolving, and we think each quarter we start to get more and more information, and it's easier for investors to model. But right now, there are so many developments, understanding the total addressable market, when those markets come online, and ultimately what products will be sold in those markets. You know, is really something we're learning. So I think each quarter we'll continue to see it start moving towards something that's a little less volatile.
Now, one of the challenges that all the big pot companies have figuring out these markets is that everything you put on the shelves is just flying off, right? Because there's not nearly enough supply to meet the current demand. With that in mind, how on earth do you figure out which products are going to be the winners here?
You know, I think, look, it's a challenge, but it's also, I think if you were to ask most CEOs, you know, how do you feel about the fact that all of your product is selling out, they'd be happy. But, you know, we can still look at velocity, and I think as we are able to get more and more supply on the shelves over the coming months, we'll gain more and more consumer insights, and we can use that to understand which products, you know, are performing and which are performing not as well, and we can then adjust our product offering based on that.
Can you give us some details on that? What products are performing, and how do you plan on ramping up growth?
Sure. You know, again, the challenge for the launch is that, you know, when you look at sales velocity, it was near instant where sales were really moving quickly. But, you know, we've seen strength in really all the categories that were launched. We'll be able to start getting more data, you know, over the coming months, though, on which ones are performing better.
Where do you think that the biggest value lies in this business ultimately? Is it in the recreational use and its association with cannabis and all that goes with it? Or is it in the more pharmaceutical end of the market? Ultimately, are you a recreation company or are you a pharmaceutical company will be a key factor in determining how valuations ultimately stick.
Well, I think, you know, you're likely to see more volume on the recreational side and higher margins on the pharmaceutical side. You know, we think of ourselves as category agnostic and cannabinoid specific. Our advantage is in cannabinoids. You know, we've had the unique opportunity to work with, research, and develop products from cannabinoids. And based off of what those products are, you know, I think it's a commercialization analysis, market by market, and based off of regulations, whether that ultimate product is going into a pharmaceutical channel or into a recreational channel.
Mike, someone who is quite bearish on the sector, Andrew Left of Citra Research, we saw him come out yesterday and actually say he thinks cannabis is a great short trade because essentially the companies are non-branded, there's no moat, and once it gets legalized in the US, the Canadian companies such as Cronos, Tilray, etc., are going to find it very hard to compete. Does he have a point?
Well, I would argue that there's actually more opportunity for differentiation in cannabis than traditional CPG, because in addition to the other planes, you know, so planes of differentiation like taste, aroma, you know, look, feel, story, we can actually differentiate based off a psychoactive effect. And 2/3 of consumers making purchasing decision based off of psychoactive effects gives cannabis companies a much larger opportunity to differentiate. And, you know, as far as the U.S. opening up, the same way we treat Germany, Australia, Poland, when the U.S. opens up, we see that as a market for us. And our strategy for the U.S. was to come to a place where it's federally legal, understand how to operate compliantly and, you know, with federal guidelines that are, you know, much more stringent. And that way we have a turnkey solution to move into the U.S. when it opens.
And when the US does open, can we expect Cronos to quickly relocate, as in is Canada legal as it is now? Is it just a sort of holding cell for the company until the US opens up?
No, Canada's an important market to us. I think that, you know, Canada is a real market. You know, as far as market size, it may not be as large, but, you know, I think it's a market that we always will look at as our home market, something that we care a lot about. But it is something that the value comes from being able to then take the insights that we have here. We will never stop operations here, but we will continue to expand globally.
Well, what kind of product expansion do you expect to see, particularly in Canada, before the next federal election? It seems like this is the perfect opportunity for that to happen in Canada right now. Can you give us some details on what you're anticipating?
Yeah, I think right now we started off with flower, tincture oil, pre-rolls. I think you'll see that expand into vaporizers, into edibles, beverages, topicals. There's a huge range of products that I think will be allowed, and I think you'll see regulations that are a little bit more broad and provide for some room for companies to be innovative with what those ultimate delivery systems are.
You talked a moment ago about Germany. I'm just kind of curious, where do you see around the world, and I'm sure you talk to an awful lot of people about where markets are ultimately going to be opening up. We've been spending a lot of time talking about Canada. We've been spending a lot of time talking about the United States. Where are the next markets that ultimately could become available?
Yeah, I think you're seeing a lot of movement in Northern Europe. I think that some markets, we just seen the UK start to open for medical. I think Spain, Italy, Ireland are markets to watch. We're seeing a pretty strong trend, and I think that medical will always come first, and you'll see recreation follow.
Mike, we seem to be at a point in the industry right now where the race really is for intellectual property, who can hoover up the most of it fastest. How are we going to determine who wins and who loses going forward in the cannabis industry, and perhaps why will Cronos be a winner or a loser?
I think you're right. IP is going to be what separates the winners and the losers, and we've really allocated the biggest amount of our sort of resources, whether it's financial or whether it's just human capital, towards developing IP. We think IP is what's scalable. IP is what will move between markets, and I think the way we're thinking about it is really where will the industry be in 5 years, not where is it today, and that comes to a number of factors, starting with ginkgo. We think that's really going to change the way that the derivative products are manufactured.